I was working at a financial firm in New York City with a bunch of very smart people, and I had a brilliant boss I much admired. I went to my boss and told him I was going to start a company selling books on the internet. He took me on a long walk in Central Park, listened carefully to me, and finally said, "That sounds like a really good idea, but it would be an even better idea for someone who didn't already have a good job." Okay, if I go do this thing and participate in this thing called the internet that I genuinely believe is going to be a big deal, and if I fail, am I going to regret having tried and failed? And I knew the answer to that was no. But I also knew that if I didn't try, that I would always regret that. I would always wonder, and it would haunt me until that mythical day, which I actually hope will come. That logic made some sense to me, and he convinced me to think about it for 48 hours before making a final decision. Seen in that light, it really was a difficult choice, but ultimately, I decided I had to give it a shot. I didn't think I'd regret trying and failing, and I suspected I would always be haunted by a decision to not try at all. After much consideration, I took the less safe path to follow my passion, and I'm proud of that choice. The wake-up call that led to starting Amazon.com was finding that web usage in the spring of 1994 was growing at 2,300% a year. And things just do not grow that fast. Outside of, I guess, usually like Petri dishes or something. I mean, it's a very, very unusual growth rate. And you could tell anecdotally, even though there wasn't good research on this at the time, that the baseline of web usage wasn't trivial. And so something with a non-trivial baseline growing at 2,300% a year is clearly going to be everywhere tomorrow. And so the question was, what kind of business plan would make sense in the context of that growth? And I went through a whole bunch of different things. I made a list of 20 different products, looking for the first best product to sell online. Came up with books for a bunch of reasons, but primarily because books are very unusual in one respect, and that is that there are more of them than there are products of any other category. So there are literally millions of different books in print at any given time, and computers are good at organizing such large selections of products, and you could build something online that literally couldn't be built any other way. You couldn't have a physical world bookstore or a paper catalog with millions of different books. And the primitive technology that was the web in 1994 clearly required that kind of characteristic for a business. It had to be something that could only be done in that way. So that's what led to books. There was a great moment when we were examining every order that would come into Amazon, and it was always a family member placing the order. And the first order that we got from a stranger, I remember, there were probably half a dozen or 10 of us in the company at that time. We're all gathered around after the bell rang and looking at the order, and we're like, "Is that your mom? That's not my mom." And thus it began. A lot has happened over the last 15 years. As I said, we've made a lot of mistakes. We've learned some things. And I want to tell you everything I know. I can guarantee you everything I know. It's a very short list. This won't take long. And it's complete too. All right, well, the first thing I know is that you need to obsess over customers. I can tell you that we have been doing this from the very beginning, and it's the only reason that Amazon.com exists today in any form. We've always put customers first. When given the choice of obsessing over competitors or obsessing over customers, we always obsess over customers. We pay attention to what our competitors do, but it's not where we put our energy. It's not where we get our motivation from. We really like to start with customers and work backwards. And again, that is the key thing that I know, and it covers a lot of other mistakes. If you're truly obsessed over customers, it'll cover a lot of errors. The second thing I know is invent. It's really important to invent.
Anytime we have a problem, we never accept either or thinking. We try to figure out a solution that gets both things. And that often requires invention, but you can invent your way out of any box if you believe that you can. And what we talk about is inventing on behalf of customers. It's not a customer's job to invent for themselves. You need to listen to customers. It's critical. If you don't listen to customers, you will go astray. But they won't tell you everything, and so you need to invent on their behalf. And that focus on invention has served us well. Some of the recent things, even Kindle, not just Kindle, but EC2, the Elastic Compute Cloud, these are things that we would have never gotten to if we didn't have an inventive culture. But also, those are kind of large grain things, but there are small things too. And then, think long term. This is really critical. Any company that wants to focus on customers and put customers first, any company that wants to invent on behalf of customers has to be willing to think long term. And it's actually much rarer than you might think. I find that most of the initiatives we undertake may take 5 to 7 years before they pay any dividends for the company. They may start paying dividends for customers right away. They often take a long time to pan out for shareholders in the company. So that ability to think in sort of 5 years and 7-year time frames really is very, very useful for us, and it's definitely one of the things that I know. It requires, by the way, and allows a willingness to be misunderstood. If you think long term, many of the inventions that we undertake, maybe if they're disruptive in any way, they may not be understood in the early innings, and it's always been very important for us to think long term so that we can tolerate being misunderstood. We've been called Amazon.toast, Amazon.con, many different things, many of them not appropriate for a video. And if we think we're right, then we continue. If we think we're wrong, if we're criticized about something we think we're wrong, we change it.
That was how the decision was made to go do this, and there are just literally tons of stories about the early days of getting Amazon.com set up. You know, we spent about a year building the software infrastructure and getting all the vendor relationships in place and so on and so on. The day before we were ready to launch the store in July of 1995, one of the software engineers, we were looking at our little 400 square foot distribution center. And I remember very clearly this person looked at this. 400 square feet is about the size of one car garage. So it was a kind of a toy distribution center, and although there were real software systems behind it. And he said, he looked at this little space, he said, I can't figure out if this is incredibly optimistic or hopelessly pathetic. And indeed, we didn't know. There really was no way to know how customers were going to adopt this kind of technology in these very early days. There was a lot of risk involved, in fact, also in the audience today. And when we launched that store in July of 1995, we were shocked at the customer response. Literally in the first 30 days, we had orders from all 50 states and 45 different countries. And we were woefully unprepared from an operational point of view to handle that kind of volume. And in fact, we quickly expanded. We talked to our landlord and we expanded into a 2,000 square foot basement warehouse space that had 6-foot ceilings. One of our 10 employees was 6'2". He went around like this the whole time, and we were doing our day jobs, which might have been, computer programming and all the different things that 10 people will do in a little tiny startup company. And then we would spend all afternoon and into the wee hours of the morning packing up the orders and shipping them out. I would drive these things to UPS, and so we'd get the last one, and we'd wait to the last second. I'd get to UPS and I'd sort of bang on the glass door that was closed, and they always would take pity on me and sort of open up and let us, ship things late. We had so many orders that we weren't ready for that we had we had no real organization in our distribution centers at all. In fact, we were packing on our hands and knees on a hard concrete floor. And I remember, just to show you how stupid I can be, my only defense is that it was late, but we were packing these things, everybody in the company, and I had this brainstorm, and as I said to the person next to me, this packing is killing me. My back hurts. This is killing my knees on this hard cement floor. And the person said, yeah, I know what you mean. And I said, you know what we need? This is my brilliant insight. We need knee pads. I was very serious. And this person looked at me like I was the stupidest person they'd ever seen. They're like, I'm working for this person. This is great. And said, what we need is packing tables. And I looked at this person, and I thought that was the smartest idea I'd ever heard. The next day we got packing tables, and I think we doubled our productivity. That early stage, by the way, of Amazon.com, where we were so unprepared, is probably one of the luckiest things that ever happened to us, because it formed a culture of customer service in every department of the company, every single person in the company, because we had to work with our hands so close to the customers, making sure those orders went out, really set up a culture that served us well. And that is our goal, to be Earth's most customer-centric. What I want to talk to you about today is the difference between gifts and choices. Cleverness is a gift. Kindness is a choice. Gifts are easy. They're given, after all. Choices can be hard. You can seduce yourself with your gifts if you're not careful. And if you do, it'll probably be to the detriment of your choices. This is a group with many gifts. I'm sure one of your gifts is the gift of a smart and capable brain. Your smarts will come in handy because you will travel in a land of marvels. We humans, plodding as we are, will astonish ourselves. We'll invent ways to generate clean energy, and a lot of it. Atom by atom, we'll assemble small machines that can enter cell walls and make repairs. This month comes the extraordinary but inevitable news that we've synthesized life. In the coming years, we'll not only synthesize it, but engineer it to specifications. I believe you'll even see us understand the human brain. Jules Verne, Mark Twain, Galileo, Newton, all the curious from the ages would have wanted to be alive, most of all, right now. As a civilization, we will have so many gifts, just as you as individuals have so many individual gifts as you sit before me. How will you use these gifts? And will you take pride in your gifts or pride in your choices? Tomorrow, in a very real sense, your life, the life you author from scratch on your own, begins. How will you use your gifts? What choices will you make? Will inertia be your guide, or will you follow your passions? Will you follow dogma, or will you be original? Will you choose a life of ease, or a life of service and adventure? Will you wilt under criticism, or will you follow your convictions? Will you bluff it out when you're wrong, or will you apologize? Will you guard your heart against rejection, or will you act when you fall in love? Will you play it safe, or will you be a little bit swashbuckling? When it's tough, will you give up, or will you be relentless? Will you be a cynic, or will you be a builder? Will you be clever? the expense of others? Or will you be kind?
It's always day one. There's always more invention in the future, always more customer innovation, new ways to obsess over customers.